This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, helping you to navigate your private practice journey. This is session number 91 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, everyone. I'm Gordon Brewer, and I'm glad you're listening to the podcast. If this is the first time for you to hear the podcast, The Practice of Therapy, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Glad you found us. If you're returning, I'm glad you're back, and I hope you keep coming back. And if you like what you're hearing, I hope you'll share with your friends and colleagues. And as always, I hope that the information you get in this podcast is helpful in your private practice journey, which is the whole reason I do all of this. So today I've got another repeat guest, and I'm so glad that Whitney Owens is joining me again. As I mentioned to her at the beginning, up until now, she is still the number one. Her previous podcast episode, which was episode number 36. It's hard to believe that it's been that long since I had her on the podcast. But Whitney is a delightful person. She is in practice down in Savannah, Georgia, and we'll tell you a little bit more about how she and I met and her journey here as we get to her. But I'm so glad Whitney joined me again for the podcast. She's got some exciting stuff coming up for her. You know, one of the things I realized this week when I was walking, I think I might have shared with most of you just kind of my routine is that here, at least for the last month, most mornings and not, I'll spend about an hour walking in the mornings. And fortunately, where I live, there's a green belt, which is just goes down along a stream, and I'm able to walk and clear my head for the day and think about things. But one of the things that I realized is that with all of the stuff I put out there in terms of resources, a lot of times in the way that I communicate about those resources, I really maybe take for granted what I know. And what I mean by that is that I forget which podcast I was listening to this past week. It was probably either Pat Flynn or it might have been, I can't remember now. It might have been Paul Jarvis, who was on a previous podcast here. But anyway, I was just thinking about a lot of times we take for granted the stuff that we know. And we just, because it's something that we know and is just kind of ingrained in what we do every day in and day out, we don't realize that there are folks that don't know what we know. And I think a lot of times that is true for us as therapists. And I know a lot of times when clients come in, we expect them to maybe we take for granted the fact that they don't have quite the psychological repertoire that we have, that we just kind of know instinctively and just kind of know all that. But in terms of this podcast and what I was recognizing with the practice of therapy is that, for example, with some of the courses I've got out there, I might not do a good job of explaining and telling what those courses are for and why they might be helpful to you. So anyway, I wanted to let you know that I've got a lot of resources. And if you go to practiceoftherapy.com, and at the top of the page there should be a button for cool resources. Take a look at those things there. In particular, the courses that I've got out there. I've got one, G Suite for Therapists. I've had it out for a while. I'll let you in on a little secret here. I'm getting ready to do some updates for it and do some more stuff with it. And once I do that, I'm probably going to go up on the price of it. But here's the thing about the courses that you buy from me is that when you buy the course, you've got lifetime access to it. So it's something you can go back and look at later. All of the lessons and the courses that I have are video lessons, and I go through and just talk about the different topics that I'm talking about. The other course that I have is the Money Matters in Private Practice. And for those of you that have been listening to that, listening to the podcast, not listening to that, but listening to the podcast, you've heard me talk a lot about that. But if you'll go to the cool resources page, or there's another button for take a course at practiceoftherapy.com, you can see what I've got available there. But one of the things that I just took for granted that people might not have known is that once you enroll in the course, even when I do updates to the course, you'll still have access to it. So take advantage of those resources. The G Suite for Therapists course will teach you how to use the tools of Google G Suite in particular to make them HIPAA compliant, and then be able to do just lots of cool things with your practice. And Whitney and I talk about that a little bit in the podcast about when she took the course, she learned a little bit more about how to set up a dashboard for your practice and track things in your practice using Google Forms, which is probably one of the gold gems, or whatever you want to call it, in G Suite that you can just customize to do so many things with. So anyway, I just wanted to commend that to you. Just wanted to make sure that you knew the courses I have available. When you sign up for them, enroll in them, you've got lifetime access. So just wanted to make you aware of that. So today, as I mentioned, Whitney Owens is back with me. Whitney she is just a delight. And as I said, she doesn't have an accent. She's from Savannah, Georgia. And as a Southerner, I can understand her. And she and I have so much in common. Her husband, James, is a delight. He's a pastor there in Savannah, and she's got two of the most delightful daughters. I haven't gotten to meet them in person, but I just get to see her pictures on Facebook and such. And she's just got a beautiful family. But anyway, I'm going to introduce you here to Whitney Owens, and she can tell you more about what she's up to here lately. So without further ado, here is Whitney Owens. Well, hello everyone, and welcome again to the Practice of Therapy podcast. And I'm so excited to have a repeat guest, my good friend, Whitney Owens. And Whitney had contacted me. She's been doing some great stuff. And one little secret I let her in on is that Whitney Owens, her previous episode, and I can't recall the number. Do you remember what it was, Whitney, which number it was?
I don't.
Okay. So, well, it doesn't really matter. But anyway, her previous episode has had the most downloads of any episode that I've done. And so when you hear Whitney, you'll know why she is such a natural at this. Plus, the big thing about Whitney is she does not have an accent. She's from the South, so to me, she does not have an accent. So welcome, Whitney. I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, thanks, Gordon. I think I have a thick accent, but we have good company together. So
yes, we do. We do. We understand each other. So, so Whitney's in Savannah, Georgia. And so, Whitney, tell folks about your practice and just kind of where you are now in your journey.
Yep. So my practice is called Water's Edge Counseling. And like Gordon said, we're in Savannah, Georgia, right by the water. I started the practice in 2015 solo, did that for several years, and then started adding some clinicians to the practice. That was January 2018 was when I started adding clinicians. I started out with contractors, had 2 contractors. Those kind of phased out for various reasons. And then I ended up making a change to employees. So now I have 3 employees that work with me as clinicians, and I also have an assistant that's also an employee. So right now we have a group of, there's 5 of us, also looking to expand a little bit more and max out my office space.
That's exciting. It really is. Whitney and I were together. I first met Whitney when we're both kind of Joe Sanok cohorts, and you heard from Joe a couple of episodes ago. But we were at an event that Joe did called Next Level Living Room, and Whitney and I very quickly realized we had a lot in common with our practices. And one of the things that we did pretty much and worked on together, if I recall, in that whole event was switching from hiring contract therapists to having actual employees. And so before we started recording, we started kind of talking about that. So Whitney, tell folks a little bit about your process with that, and I'll share a little bit of my process, and hopefully people can kind of get some ideas with all of that.
Sure. I think when I started, when you're adding your first clinicians, kind of a scary time. So I ended up starting with contractors. I guess I felt like that was the least risky thing to do, least risky, not only just personally, emotionally, and for the name of the business, but also financially. So I started that way. And then that was going okay. But I also just kind of felt like there wasn't a lot of camaraderie the way that I wanted to have in my business. We kind of talked some about the clients and some about what we were doing, but it kind of felt too much like we were each doing our own practices. And so then I also didn't have as much say in what they were doing as I'd like, as far as things like how they're doing their notes, or maybe I'm wanting to have a little bit more say in what kind of treatment they're offering. So I might not feel comfortable with what they're doing or what they're sharing, but as a contractee, I can't really tell them what they should and shouldn't be doing. They get to choose how they do their therapy. Right. So I felt like my name in town, I wasn't really sure how that was going. And I just wanted to provide more supervision. So fortunately, things have a way of working out. Both of those contractors, for various reasons, ended up leaving. Actually, the day one of them put her notice in was the same day I interviewed my first W-2 person.
Wow.
So things work out. It was like 2 hours later, someone else came in. I was like, oh, I love you, and I'm going to make you W-2. So anyway, so last November, I hired my first W-2. And then in January, I hired 2 more at the same time. And I have been so happy with the change for every reason. Like, there's just way more teamwork. We have staff meetings together. We're talking about our work with clients. We're able to do more events, like at Christmas, I took them out to dinner, things like that you can't as easily do with contractors. Mm-hmm. I'm able to provide more services, help pay for like continuing education events that they want to attend. So I've really enjoyed that aspect of it, but also the financial part has been great. I feel like the business overall financially is doing a lot better than where it was with contractors. So I felt like I was paying my contractors more than I was even caring for myself. And now it feels like a lot more even in what we're doing.
Right. And that as we were speaking about before, that was the same kind of parallel journey for me. The first of this year, I switched from having contractors to having employees. And yeah, I know. And, for the same reasons, I thought, having contractors is less complicated. There's not as much paperwork and all of that, but you're right. You don't have quite as much control. And what has been great is that it has actually switching has been much better for the bottom line. And I think a lot of that has to do with, the structure of the fees and all of that sort of thing. And so, yeah, it's been pretty amazing, really.
Yeah, I feel like the morale is much better, and people are more bought into the idea of Water's Edge counseling and care a lot more about the business and feel like they're a part of it, as opposed to kind of feeling like they're doing their own thing.
Right. Well, one of the things I ran into with the people I had is that I had one person in particular that she stayed with me when we made the switch, but actually it is helping her more financially as well, because she's not having to pay the self-employment tax. And so that was, she did not realize that she was actually making less because of that as a contractor. And also, the other thing too is that really, even though she was a contractor, she was treating herself more like an employee, because she had never, really worked under that contractor model. So, yeah, so it ended up, at least for her, ended up being a win-win for both of us.
That's great. The person the contractor that I had, I tried to offer her the W-2, tried to explain to her why I thought it'd be great for her, but she just didn't want that. And that was probably also part of the reason she started walking away, because she saw that I was kind of changing the model. I wanted her to be a part of it, but she didn't feel like it was her best interest.
Yeah. And I lost some people too. I mean, that was, and I kind of knew that would be a loss going into it, but it was, it turned out to be better deals. So I guess maybe the thing for those of you listening to really can think about is definitely run your numbers and really understand how, even though it might seem like you're paying out more for employees, actually it can be much more profitable if you structure it right. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. So you've been doing some other things too, Whitney. I know you're expanding your practice, and you've just grown great guns over the last couple of years. And if I remember correctly, the title of your previous podcast episode with me was something about growing your practice fast, and you've continued with that. And how has that happened?
Yeah, I ask myself that same question, right? So I do think that the website part is huge, and I do track all the calls. I took Gordon's G Suite course, and I did learn a lot through that. And so I used the form application through G Suite for all the calls, and we log all the calls, and I can go back and see how did they hear about us. And I love the way it graphs it all out for you. So it's so easy to kind of see all that.
Right.
But we get most of our referrals through Google, which I was surprised about, because Savannah's, I think it's a pretty small town. Word gets around, so I thought it'd actually be more word of mouth, but it's really more Google. So I spend a lot of time getting the blogs up and trying to improve SEO. So I think that's making a big impact. And lately I've just started doing extra things, like kind of getting my toes wet in some different things to see what works. So recently we invested in a 6-month promotion through, I don't know if you'll understand it all, but it's a big local thing here. It's called Southern Mamas, and you pay for the 6 months, and then you're able to put something up once a week, and then they'll add it to their e-newsletter, and then you have a banner with your practice on it. So I put up information like how to keep your kids cool when it's hot outside, over the summer, or the recent one we're putting up for Monday is about kids have tummy problems that really might be more than just the candy they ate last night,
Right.
So we started doing that, and I'm sitting here thinking, okay, well, how many people do I need to cover the expenses I just put into this promotion? So we actually just got someone through that promotion, so I was really grateful. But so I think some of it is you practice different things. You try it out, and then you monitor, hey, did that work? I need to get 2 to 3 appointments to cover the cost of that. We also just did a promotion in the local magazine here with our practice on that, and some questions that we answered for that. And so I still haven't gotten a referral from that yet. So you got to kind of track that. But so I think that's part of the reason we're exploding is I'm just trying to get myself out there more, get the practice out there more in different ways. And I will say, the more clinicians you add, the more Psychology Today profiles you have, your SEO is only going to increase, more people here, and it really does, grow your business.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's, I've learned a lot from you just in that, and that just having kind of followed your practice and being able to really get active in the community. One of the funny thing, I'll share this story with folks. You've heard me talk about Mike Michalowicz, and if anybody has ever read the book Profit First, one of the examples he gives is this local baseball team in Savannah called the Savannah Bananas. And Whitney sent me a picture of she and Mike Michalowicz. He was at the game there in Savannah. But have you done any advertising with them?
Oh, okay. So I did reach out to the Bananas, and they said it was very expensive. I now can't remember, but it was so much. So I was like, eh. Yeah. But what's really funny about that is, so Mike and I exchanged cell phone numbers at the game, and he took a selfie and everything. And so I'm texting him like, what are all those people that you're with in those shirts? And he said, oh, those are my best Profit First people, the top 50 come to the game. They were doing a conference. Yeah. So I went over there and sat down with the guy that's kind of the healthcare Profit First guy. And I said to him, oh, I would love to have some advertising with the Savannah Bananas. And he said, no, don't put your money into that.
Oh, so, yeah.
Profit First is telling me not to do that. So anyway, but yeah. And actually, Gordon, I don't know if I told you this, but 2 weeks later, Donald Miller was there.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, I didn't get to meet him, but
yeah, that's great. I'm going to have to come down and go to a game if I can get tickets.
Yes. Oh, well, I'll get you some.
Yeah, great, great. So there's another exciting thing that you're doing, and you just got back from Slowdown School with Joe Sanak, and you came up with some big ideas. So tell folks about those.
Yeah. So over the past, I'd say 6 to 9 months, I've had a passion of this idea of called faith in practice is kind of the word I've given it, where we would talk about how do we integrate or how do we make our faith a part of our counseling, but not just that, but a part of our group. And even when I started growing a practice, I was really unsure, like, do I want people to know my faith when I advertise myself? Do I not want them? What kind of clients do I want to bring in? Which ones do I don't? It's a lot of questions to kind of go through, not only personally, but just for your practice and for the clients. And so I had this big idea that I could help consult other practice owners, either solos or groups, and how do they want to make their faith a part of what they do? Mm-hmm. How do you market to churches? How do you kind of verbiage on your website to attract the types of clients you want to work with? All those types of things, and lots of different faiths as well. So that's kind of been my idea for a while. And then when we were at Slowdown School, it was time to actually slow down and think about things. And I realized how much I wanted to do this. And so through some wonderful conversations, Joe and I were able to connect so that I could kind of be with him and do practice work with him, but be under his umbrella and offering this faith and practice component. Because it seems like there are a lot of people out there looking for how do I do faith and practice.
Yeah. So, yeah, and I know I did a blog post about that some time ago about the difference between a faith-based practice versus a faith-informed practice. And yeah, so what have you figured out about all that so far?
Yeah, there's a lot of levels, right? I do want to read your blog post, by the way, so we'll have to get that. But yeah, I kind of see that there are people that are on a high level where they want to make faith a part of everything they do in their practice. And that means the name, the branding, the types of clients, the places they're going, everything is about that. And that's where they feel comfortable. And then I think it kind of scales downward in the sense of maybe you don't want faith to be a part of everything you do, but also knowing that even if you don't make it a part of everything you do as far as your advertising and things like that, it doesn't mean that clinician doesn't think their faith's important. It's just the way that they choose to do their business is different. And so I think a big part of it is figuring out where you want to be and being really intentional with what you do in that.
Right. One of the things that I've shared before on other episodes is that, and this is maybe where Whitney and I struck a chord. Whitney's husband is a pastor, and James, really great guy. And I got to know James when we were up in Michigan together. But one of the things about me is I also happen to be a clergy person in the Episcopal Church. And so I think one of the things that I've figured out in my own practice is that I would say I've got maybe kind of a faith-informed practice, and that's just part of who I am. But what I tell clients on the front end is I'm very transparent about the fact that I'm a clergy person and sometimes wear a funny collar and all that kind of stuff. But I don't have a religious agenda with my counseling. But if those are ever things they want to talk about, need to talk about, I have a lot of fun with that and enjoy talking about those things, but they're not going to hear it from me first. And so I think I think you're right, Whitney. There's a way to find a balance with that for people.
Yeah. And I think a big part of it, even us as therapists, is being able to respect where people feel like they need to be, that we can all be in a different place in the way that we share faith in counseling or share faith with the community, and that's okay, because practices do need to be in different places so that we can reach more people for mental health. Right.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times when people hear the word faith, they assume that is automatically kind of a Christian kind of background, but it could be any faith, really.
Sure.
Yeah. So what else have you got coming up for you that you're excited about that you want to share?
Yeah, so the consulting is the most exciting part, and that's relatively new. So I'm kind of bursting at the seams with ideas of how to do that, and excited about connecting with other clinicians on that. So if you do want to like get involved or know more about that, you can go to Practice the Practice /resources to kind of get on the mailing list, so you would get that information. But we're in the beginning stages of figuring out how we're going to get this information out. But that's how you would get that. I'm also going to be going to Killin'It Camp with Gordon and a lot of other great clinicians. Do you want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah, just so you're going to be, I know you had mentioned to me you're going to be kind of focusing on that as part of your presentation there. But so tell folks about that.
Yeah, so I'm going to be doing I think it's like a breakout session. It would be focused on how to market and network with churches and faith-based organizations. Get a lot of questions from clinicians on how do I actually contact like a church or a synagogue? Like who do I contact? How do I do that? How do I make that relationship? So that's kind of some of the questions I'm going to be addressing in that talk, and how to keep those relationships sustained, not just a one-time encounter, so that we can continue to get clients back and forth.
Right. Yeah. So for those folks that are maybe thinking about a faith-based practice or maybe being drawn in that direction, what would be some things that you would maybe suggest that they do maybe at the starting point?
That's such a good question. Love that you asked that. I would say they slow down and think about what they're doing. Like, what kind of practice do you want to have, and why do you want to have that type of practice? Like, what kind of clients are you wanting to draw in, and what kind of work are you wanting to do with them? So there's so much of that brainstorming part, and that slowing down part will help with that. So that's where I say you would kind of start and have fun with it. Like, I think it's easy for us at the beginning to be so anxious about starting a practice, but this is the most exciting part at the same time. So being able to like enjoy those phases of exploration.
Right. What are in your, to switch a little bit, in your practice as you've grown pretty exponentially, what have been the I guess maybe the struggle areas for you, just in growing your practice? I mean, I hope that question makes sense.
Are you asking faith-based, or are you just asking in general?
Well, just in general, yeah. And then, and also just both, I guess both, really.
I think at the beginning, one of my biggest fears was more just personal. Can I do this? Can I be a leader? Can I be an employer? I mean, and the financial part, stepping out financially, those kinds of things are hurdles. I think managing the employees and hiring is a real challenge. Getting the right fit, the right person, and then that switch from contractor to employee, that was huge. So those are kind of some of the hurdles at the beginning, but just as we take those steps forward, we see that we can do it. That kind of gives me that confidence. Okay, I'm going to make that next step. I'm going to hire 2 more people,
Yeah. So with the hiring process, what's your interview process like?
Yeah. So I actually love Indeed, and I know a lot of people don't like it, but I think it's really great. I love that I can share it with my assistant, and we can see everything in real time. And it has ability to kind of go through different scales, I guess, where, hey, I see the application. Okay, now I've done a phone screen. Now we've done an interview. Now we've accepted, or now we've rejected. And so my assistant and I can both see that we're doing that. So we get all the applications in. So I advertise on Indeed, and I advertise like on Facebook and on my website. But I don't do a ton of advertising other than that, because I get enough applications through that. Yeah. And so far, all 3 of my employees came through Indeed, and they've all been great. And so anyway, on the front end, we review those, and I tell my assistant, hey, these are the things I'm looking for. And she kind of has that list. And so she scans through all the resumes. She narrows it down to the ones that she thinks meet those criteria. And then she phone screens everyone. She's got 6 questions she goes through with them. And then after the phone screen, we set up interviews for, depending on how many I'm hiring. But this time I'm wanting to probably hire 2 people. So we're going to set up 3 to 4 interviews. And then I go from there. And if I'm not feeling very confident, I might bring another one of my therapists in. I've had that happen before, and have them sit in, especially if it's someone who's going to need clinical supervision. and I bring the person that would be the supervisor in to kind of have that conversation. And then after we do that, I get 3 references, and I have some questions that I go through with those, and my assistant helps me with all that.
Right. Yeah, that sounds like a very similar process for me. Yeah, I've had good luck with Indeed as well when I've used it. So, and also Facebook, the Facebook Jobs app there is, I know I shared with Whitney, we had been in the process of hiring a new admin person, and I did all of that through the Facebook Jobs app, and I was just overwhelmed with the number of applications. So, some of them were pretty easy to reject right off, but I mean, I got a lot of responses from that, so that was good. So, yeah. So we've got Killin'It Camp coming up, and so there'll be links to that in the show summary and the show notes. What are some maybe parting thoughts, Whitney, for folks that are listening?
It's funny because I actually remember what my parting thoughts were last time, and I still feel so similar. Like, private practice is such a journey, and you have to be committed to it, and you have to move forward in it, and you're going to have some highs and you're going to have some lows, but don't stop. Like, keep going. And even just through masterminds I've done and through Slow Down School, having other people that are like-minded in what you're doing is so important. That you have that community and that challenge, because I love my friends, but my friends aren't necessarily doing private practice. So I kind of need my private practice gurus over here that we connect. And then I have my other friends over there because I need that to get myself moving forward.
Yeah. Well, you just kind of answered this already, but a question that comes up for me is, what would you attribute to, what would be the top 3 things that you would attribute to your success in private practice?
Yeah, so definitely the mastermind group. I do Joe's group, and that has really given me a good kick in the butt to keep going. I need that accountability or I won't be moving as fast. Mm-hmm. So that's a big part. Another one would be just that I hired some great people here with the employees. And so they've really been part of the reason we've done so well. The other reason I've done so well, I would say, is my assistant. And I was really hesitant for a really long time to hire an assistant because that's the first person you're hiring that doesn't actually bring in money. Mm-hmm. So that was really scary for me, but she has made my life so much easier, and I'm spending way more time doing the things that make me money or doing the things that I enjoy, and she's able to really spend more time with the calls and the clients that are needing that extra time that I wasn't able to really give.
Right. Is she is your assistant in-house, or do you do a virtual assistant?
Yeah, so actually she's neither. She is a stay-at-home mom. Wow. She has 4 kids. Yeah, and so people actually do find this unique about my practice. So she just tracks her time when she takes the calls, and she can take the calls right on her phone. She does come into the office for staff meeting, usually once a month. Mm-hmm. And she'll sometimes run checks to the bank or run supplies over to the office and fill the fridge. But I love having someone local because she's actually from Savannah, and Savannah's one of those towns that if you're from here, people know you. And so that's probably helped with some of our business. She's had several personal friends call, I didn't know you worked there. I want to see a counselor. So having someone local who understands the area, understands the people that are calling, can say, hey, I know exactly where the office is. I've been there many times. This is what it's like. Has been really, really wonderful. And so she's fully committed to my practice, which I really like, and I can call her anytime and ask her 1,000 things. And yeah, she's kind of my little personal assistant is how I kind of think of her. James calls her my work wife.
Yeah. Great. That's great. Well, Whitney, I want to be respectful of your time, but tell folks how they can get in touch with you and if they want to find out more about what you're doing.
Sure. So my email is whitney@watersedgecounseling.com. So feel free to shoot me an email or anything like that. My number is 912-319-5553, and you can get in touch with Water's Edge Counseling or me or anything I can do for you.
Great. Well, I'm sure we'll be doing this another time, especially maybe once we get back from Killin'It Camp.
I know, it's going to be great.
A ton of stuff that comes out of that. So, Whitney, thanks again for being on the podcast, and I'm looking forward to us keeping up with each other in our journeys.
Me too. Thanks, Gordon.
Take care. Well, folks, I hope that you enjoyed hearing from Whitney Owens again. I'm so glad that she was able to join me again for the podcast. She's got quite a practice down in Savannah, Georgia. And, if you follow Whitney, as I've been able to follow her, you can just really see how she has just really blossomed in her practice. And she sets a good example for us all to be able to follow. She has just really done a great job with what she's doing, and I'm so excited for her and the success that she's having. I don't know if she mentioned in the podcast, but she's getting ready to add 2 new therapists. So I'm learning a lot from Whitney as we go as well, and I'm so glad that she's jumping into the consulting realm here with some of us others, and I know that she's going to just do really well with all of that. And I'll have links here in the show notes to be able to contact Whitney. And as she mentioned, she's joining Joe Sanok and his team over at the Practice of the Practice. And Joe's a great friend of mine, and Joe is just he's a great resource. And as I've said before, I don't feel like in this space of all the different people that are doing private practice consulting, mentoring, providing private practice resources, I don't see them as competition, because we're all kind of doing our own spin on things. And my experience so far is that we're all very collaborative. And so, I'm not the only, the way that I do things is not the only way of doing it, but it's, I just like to share what has worked for me and share my own journey, which is why I started the Practice of Therapy podcast to begin with. So anyway, again, thanks to Whitney for joining me again on the podcast, and I hope you've been able to learn from her. Do go over and check out the resources page at practiceoftherapy.com, and also just remember that about the courses that I've got available, G Suite for Therapists, and also the Money Matters and Private Practice courses. And again, like I said at the beginning, a lot of times I take for granted what people may or may not know about those things, but when you enroll in the course, it's you get to use it there for life. That those resources are there for you to go back and look at whenever you want to. So it's not like you have just a certain amount of time to take the course or whatever. You enroll in it, and then you can look at it and learn from it as you go at your own pace. And also, as I mentioned at the beginning, when you enroll in a course, anytime I update the course, you get the updates as well. And there's no need to re-enroll in the course. So it's a win-win deal when you do that. So also be sure and check out today's sponsor for today's podcast episode, Practice Solutions. And you can go over to practicesol.com/Gordon and learn about them. They are who I use in my practice for my medical billing and helping me with all the ins and outs of filing insurance claims and billing clients when I need to do that. And if you're in a practice where you are on insurance panels and you do accept insurance, they are a great solution, as their name implies, Practice Solutions, and that's practicesol.com/Gordon. So that's it for today, folks. Again, thanks for joining me in the podcast. Do take time to subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. And also leave us a review. I love being able to get honest feedback about the podcast, and give us a rating as well. That just helps other people find us. And if you're liking what you hear, be sure and share us with others, and share us on social media as well. Love getting that the word out there so that people can be helped by the resources and learn from the guests as I do just by doing the podcast. So take care, folks. We'll be we'll be back again next week if all goes well. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. Been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free private practice startup guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.